Howdy, eco-farmers. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we will explore sustainable farming, real-world regenerative practices, and the latest innovations and technology shaping the future of ecological agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. This episode of the podcast is proudly supported by Azure Standard and American Farmland Trust, two organizations that are deeply committed to strengthening farms, building healthier food systems, and promoting land stewardship across the country. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Now let's get into today's conversation.
Okay, everybody, we're going to get started here. We have a panel for you today hosted by Joel Hollingsworth. Joel is a first-generation farmer and the owner of Smoke River Ranch and a leader in transitioning traditional ranches to regenerative, economically resilient systems. Known for his work with herd shares, adaptive grazing, and nutrient-dense food production, he brings a realistic, forward-thinking approach to building profitable, regenerative ranching models. Take it away, Joel.
Howdy, everybody. So this is going to be a fun panel. A little more about me. I started with no money, no land, no cows in 2019. We scaled in from nothing to about 500 head with one of the leading ultra-high-density grazing operations in the country. It's both been like pure stubbornness, willingness to die on the altar of it, and creativity and entrepreneurial genius to make that possible, mixed with the favor of God and miracles. Our goal with this panel, it takes a strong middle class working at middle scale with a vibrant young generation to make a strong nation. If we do not get the young generation successfully wading into the industry and farming in a profitable manner, the whole system collapses, as does our nation. And our goal in this panel right now, I don't know the answers to how to make that work. I'm on the bleeding edge of stubbornly trying to figure that out in the real world, scaling something like I am from zero, running into all these problems head on. And the problem that we have a lot of conversation on Twitter about this, where everybody is so distracted talking about the trees, ignoring the forest. They don't see the water we're swimming in, or the ecosystem, not defined just as nature, but of the monetary policy, of culture, of demographics, of politics, of property rights in the capital base of America, that is dictating how the problems function and what it takes to solve them. So we're going to use this talk to kind of define the problems of the ecosystem or water we're swimming in, with the goal being that after this panel, I want to have good conversations where we'll all be available to brainstorm with you guys, like, how do we fix this? And we want to have conversations that are useful, that aren't distracted by these little side details of things all of us on the ground have already tried, that share the context of what's really causing the issues in America agriculture today. So Adam, Matt, go ahead and introduce yourselves real quick.
Okay, my name's Adam Lasch. My wife and I started milking cows in 2016. We were first generation, and we have run into all of the problems that Joel talks about. And that led us down the regenerative path. We kind of backed into it because we were looking for more feed for our animals, and kind of closed a bunch of loops and decided that there's a future here for us in ag. But that every roadblock that we stepped into, it was like, okay, where is this coming from? Why are we doing this? Why is everybody in our neighborhood old? And that led us down to a whole path of awakening and understanding.
Where are you at on the regenerative versus conventional spectrum? What's the size of your operation?
So we milk about 50 cows. We're very diversified. We also have beef herd. We also do some grazing. We got about 250 acres, mostly rented land. We've got some poultry, and we try and do some direct marketing. We're very much still in the conventional model with regenerative roots, I would say. So southeast Wisconsin, so Lake Geneva.
I'm northeast Oklahoma.
I'm up by Amherst, 100 miles north of here.
Yep. To you, Matt.
Okay, well, I let that part out of the bag. I'm jumping around here now. So I'm Matt Hintz. My wife and I and 13-year-old son farm about 100 miles north of here by Amherst. First generation farm as well. My story started when I sold 2 fair pigs and bought a farm all-age tractor when I was 14 and morphed it into this 3-ring circus that I got today. I guess I talked to Adam a lot, I guess, about, all the same issues. It's good to have a sounding board so you can stay, somewhat mentally with it.
Somebody to commiserate with,
Yeah.
keep you from losing heart.
That's right. But I guess we're here to have a panel and talk about the challenges, successes, and where do we go from here.
I just have one question for the audience. Why are you guys in this room?
Yeah, because this is a kind of niche topic, economics. So popcorn real quick, 30 seconds. Shout at me what you guys are here for.
Bold new ideas.
What else?
Make money.
Rural economic development model.
Okay. What's that? More farmers. Nice. How to start? Scalable. I think we can work with these people.
I think so.
Nobody said they're lost.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with agriculture's collapsing. Do I need to defend that idea, or are we mostly in agreement on that? Where are we at on the spectrum of understanding that?
Let's refine the term. Industrial farming is collapsing.
I would beg to differ even there. I'm just going to come out and say it. Almost all the old guard of thought leaders that you guys would know in the regenerative space, very, very few of them are making any money at all. Almost everything, I would even say almost is probably a word I shouldn't even use, in agriculture is subsidized. Whether it's subsidized through eroding down your infrastructure base, the health of the farmer themselves, the soil base, or through having some sort of income stream being channeled into farming. Hit me.
Orange groves, cotton farmers, almonds, corn. When you say farming, it's too big of a term for me to understand. There's so much in farming that it's not helpful.
Correct. I mean, crop farming, orchards, ranching, that statement applies to basically all of them.
Let's start with defining what the base layer of the existing conventional ag system really is.
Hit me.
It's row crop production in the Midwest. It is corn and soybeans subsidized through crop insurance as the base layer, and every other enterprise has to compete with that subsidized pair of crops. Everything else is a derivative of that.
So let me start with ranching. The average rancher in the U.S. loses 1.5% return on assets if you don't factor land appreciation. They would make more money as a land investment company than a farm. They lose money by ranching. The 89% of ranchers in the U.S. are less than 100 cows. Average herd size of that tranche is 22 animals. Jaime Elizondo says that the economically viable scale of regenerative cow-calf in the U.S. is 500 head. 85% of ranches in the U.S. have a full-time city job subsidizing their farm. Every layer you look at this, the ranches are just not making money. Like, there are more ranchers over the age of 55 than under the age of 54. The generational handoff is failing. And it all ties back largely, and Adam and I have a lot of conversations about this, to the cost of calories is set by the floor price of the government subsidies through crop insurance. You want to dive in to explain the basics of that, Adam?
Yeah, Matt, you want to go on that?
You want crop insurance 101, basically? Okay. So basically, depending on where you're at in the country, they've got these base yields you start with until you build your own APH, they call it, actual production history, I think it stands for. So say, we're here in Dane County, Wisconsin. I'm going to assume the APH is probably 190 bushel corn, and this is a guess, educated guess. So basically, you are guaranteed 190 bushel times whatever their spring price that they determine, which they take an average off the Chicago Board of Trade in February for that. And then they take another one in October, I believe, and whichever one is higher, that is how they come up with this number. And then what you do is you buy insurance into that at a certain percentage of production protection. So 75, 85% is probably pretty typical where most of that would fall.
And how much of that is subsidized by the government? What percentage?
60%, I believe.
It's now 80.
Post the Farm Bill.
There you go.
The one big, beautiful bill actually increased the subsidy. So what we're trying to get here is we do not have a free market in row crop ag. Okay?
Can you explain how the measuring of crop insurance and the whole market of that is excluding the young generation and empire building for the incumbents?
Well, you said it. We're over. There's more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 54. So what does that do? If you're guaranteed to not have a loss, how do you farm? You farm differently. You're not caring about tomorrow because today's taken care of. You know what I'm saying? So that effectively has allowed us to have empire building by the elder generations. It returns money to assets.
Where as long as you keep your input costs below the threshold of the payouts when you're paid to fail, you always make money. And so like what you're getting into here is that the base acreage is for a new farmer based on the county average, and for older farmers it's based upon their average production. The mismatch between those means that the incumbent farmers are paid to fail at a higher cost or a higher payment rate than a young farmer. So what ends up happening is until you can have like 10-ish years of production information, that the young farmer can't get paid to fail the same amount that an older farmer does. And so what ends up happening is the younger farmer can't weather the volatility. The older farmer is paid to fail, ends up buying out the younger farmer. Then no disruption can occur because there's no new blood coming into the industry to try to be creative.
Well, we never have that wildfire event that allows the old model to reset or bring anybody back in and reset the risk profile. Go ahead.
What's the history of, what do you call them, supplements or
Subsidies?
subsidies? Why, and why is it going wrong? So we give some background.
We can do that.
Background about how we got here.
How about, go ahead.
It was a good thing when it started, and what happened. So let's give a broader context.
Let's start with soil being the foundation of society, and then move towards subsidies and like what happened. Okay, so I probably don't need to debate this with this career, right? Like David Montgomery wrote a great book, Dirt, the Erosion of Civilizations. What he proved in that book, he went through a whole bunch of ancient civilizations, Rome, China, the Aztecs, and he mapped that when a society is investing in its soil fertility, they flourish generation upon generation. When they start extracting from their fertility base, they typically collapse within a generation, right? And you have this tie between soil being the base productive asset. It's a solar economy, right? You're taking the generous infinite resource God gives us as solar energy to produce food of value for the sustainment of your people. And then once you have that happening with enough surplus, you have an economy develop where not everybody has to be a subsistence farmer. Okay, and there's always a tie between that base production of soil, stewarding that for the future generations, and the economic viability of a nation. So this is where you see like the pattern where the Dust Bowl in the 30s and the Great Depression, economic collapse and soil collapse always go hand in hand. Okay, you want to go into the next piece?
Yeah, so the history of the subsidies of that is we don't want people to ever be hungry. Because what happens, you're what, 9 meals away from revolution? It is government policy that we are not going to ever have any sort of calorie deficit in this country, which is a laudable goal. But like anything, it gets taken too far. So we always want surpluses from a government policy way. And what has that done? That has shifted the balance too far in any one direction.
When did that start?
Probably right after the Dust Bowl, I would say.
1933 is a number that sticks in my head.
Well, if you look at the history of soil, even Thomas Jefferson says the quest to go west was a quest for soil fertility because the cropping practices of money crops on the East Coast eroded the soil base to where we chased the great inheritance of fertility in the Great Plains, which made us the breadbasket of the world and the powerhouse economically as a nation. And so then you transfer that extraction of poor stewardship over, which the founding history of our nation was rooted in it, right? Like the European settlers come over, they see this Edenic place of productivity, they see all the food forests, they see all the wild buffalo and animals, and so you have this system here that they didn't understand. They thought it was just naturally vibrant. They didn't understand it was like a permaculture style system the Native Americans stewarded. But like even the Native Americans participated in the extraction and decimation of the ecology. You have like the overtrapping of the beaver. The Native Americans did that, exporting the wealth of the furs to Europe. And the hard part of a lot of these phenomena at a macro society lens is that if you don't say no with solidarity, the one person extracting just has more riches they garner from it, right? And so you first have the destruction of North American ecology through the water engineers. The beaver are eliminated, so the West is no longer near as moist and productive as it once was. Then you got the railroad cutting across the nation, limiting the migration patterns of the bison, which are the keystone species of soil development on our silvopasture, like grasslands ecology, right? So you have these layers of times where soil stewardship of North America through the culture transition from the Native American management to the settlers management brought us to a place where we weren't investing in this perpetual fertility of abundance that was there before. And that fast forwards here to where you're talking about getting into these pieces of what happens in history of how do we maintain the system working without it collapsing as the fertility diminishes. So the lens of even the subsidies and culture and farming is even tied into what happened to America of how we treated our soil from our initial founding as a nation.
This year's 50th annual Acres USA EcoAg Conference was one for the record books, and now you can relive many of the inspiring moments. The 2025 EcoAg recordings are now available for purchase, featuring all keynotes, breakout sessions, and other expert presentations from the nation's leading ecological ag thinkers and practitioners, such as Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, John Kemp, Nasha Winters, and Dr. Don Huber, and many more. Whether you're a farmer, rancher, educator, or ag professional, these recordings put the best of sustainable agriculture at your fingertips, so you can learn at your own pace, revisit ideas, and take your operation to the next level. Don't miss out. Head to our conference.acresusa.com and get your complete set of the 2025 EcoAg recordings today. Your soil, your farm, and your future will thank you.
Yep. So there's a question here.
Yeah, so you mentioned the subsidies were put in place primarily because we don't want to see anybody go hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, they're out there for the row crops, corn and soybeans. But what, I mean, corn and beans, we don't need a lot of corn and beans, right? So what are we doing with corn and beans?
Go ahead, Matt.
The lettuce lobby isn't very good in Washington. And
Big
this
broccoli
whole
is,
thing is so backwards and screwed up, from calories to food, and it follow the money. I mean, that's where you're going to go.
And I guess our point here is we're at the end of this cycle, okay? Just like Joel was talking about, the last time this happened was in the 30s. Now we believe we're at that same stage. The demographics are bad. The subsidy system is bad. The incentive system is bad from government. The payments, the ad hocs, all that. The input side is bad. We're at the end of the cycle. So now what we're trying to figure out is, what does the next 50 years look like? How do we go forward?
Oh, man. We could go deep on that for like 10 hours. Okay, so a key thing here, and I don't want to go into the weeds too much on agriculture policy. Let's talk erosion of middle class and economics of America, right? In the 60s, the poverty index was developed where they were having a hard time measuring poverty. So what she did is she said that to the person who developed the poverty index is that the lower class that needed help in America was going to be calculated as 3x the average family food budget. At the time, an average American spent 33% of their income on food. Okay. If you play that forward today, the average American is only spending 5 to 7% or so of their income on food. So now that multiplier is more like 16. If you were to multiply that food budget by the actual multiplier, that poverty index would be between $140,000 to $160,000 now, not the 35 that you see, right? What we've done is we designed agriculture policy to hold down the price per calorie at the erosion of health and ecology of the nation to, as you're saying, forestall revolution, because it's a way of kind of keeping the population satisfied because you hide the damage in the future, right? And this is what always happens. We're talking bailouts with the housing crisis, like all it does is it takes the risk, brings it higher in the economy or society, and makes it more and more existential because you don't allow the creative destruction to happen on the ground layer of the economy.
It ties in with that subsidy. If people are spending less money on food, where do they spend their money? Other places in the economy. Healthcare, well, that I would say is actually the other way. The healthcare costs have gone up because of demographics. We're getting older. And we're eating garbage, exactly. Because cheap calories, cheap fillers, cheap food leads to bad health.
So if you look at the cost of things in America, even if you use government data on inflation, which I don't believe in anyway, it's way higher than what the numbers say. You look at healthcare, I think it's up like 5, 6x. You look at housing, it's up like 3 or 4x above inflation. Like all these things are way more expensive than they were in the 70s when she did the poverty index. Food is the only thing that still matches the inflation rate of what the government says inflation actually is. Agriculture policy has been intentionally designed to hold down the price of food because it's the one thing that keeps a society stable and happy. All of our policy with subsidies, every layer of this has been driven at that. And if we don't admit that that's what's happening, and this is where a lot of the negative externalities are coming from, you're missing the forest for the trees and the systems here.
I'm going to get yelled at by J.R. Burdick, who is not here. He was supposed to be a panelist on here, but one of the problems in our farming careers is we can't get enough labor, and he had trouble getting enough labor to get his milking done so he could come up here. But anyway, one of the points that he makes is because the base layer for our calories are so cheap, regenerative agriculture, he's a direct marketer, is hard to scale. Because if you can buy at the grocery store so much cheaper, if money is your limiting factor, are you going to spend more at the local neighbors or the local farm? No, because it's cheaper to go to the grocery store. So that is one of the roadblocks to scaling direct marketing and regenerative agriculture.
Well, the backdoor subsidization too. Is there any pasture poultry people in here? Chickens? All right. Costco chicken, right? What, $8 out the door? I mean, see? I mean, it's totally screwed up and backwards. So when you sit there and say, well, I want 25 or $30 for my chicken, that you get to eat everything, not just the breast or whatever, that's why you have that shock from somebody that's not used to that.
So this gets to the subsidization. Costco is willing to lose $100 million a year on their chicken. How do you compete with that?
And they do it to get somebody in the door into Costco to buy other things. Walmart's doing the same thing. They're doing their Prime Pursuits program now, where they're trying to raise their vertically integrated beef system that Walmart's investing in. They're trying to hit upper two-thirds choice. What they've learned is that if they lose money on beef having this almost prime beef in their stores, it increases the value of a shopping cart of an average person coming into Walmart by $70. It's not the beef they're making money on, it's getting somebody in the door. If they get that stacked with a wine purchase or an alcohol purchase by putting the sections close to where that Walmart beef that's actually artificially cheap because they're actually losing money on it, they get, I think it's $120 more per shopping cart, a person coming in. They're using that to control their total profit of purchases in the store, and then we as farmers have to compete against that.
Hence, everything is subsidized. Does that make sense? It's hard to compete when everything is subsidized.
And it's hard to compete with someone that's willing to do it at a loss.
Right. Sorry, what?
Molly?
Raising them, moving them every day. I'm just saying, they have grass-fed, grass-finished lamb for $5 a pound at Costco. My processing cost, because I have to pay $100 per animal disposal, and it's a smaller animal. On a cow, $100 adds up to not that much, but on a lamb, that's a ton of money. I can't even process and package for $5 a pound, and my competition is selling it for $5 a pound. But I don't know what their rules are in New Zealand. I'm pretty sure they're not paying $100.
Well, that gets into the regulation side too. That gets into the regulation side as well.
So a huge part of the problem here is misinformation in the marketplace. This gets into country of origin labeling, right? Where there's an international lobby that pushed when you were labeling beef as either foreign beef with a country on it or American, Americans were paying a premium for American beef, and they said that this was actually not fair to foreign producers, so they changed the law to hide this. 4% of the beef in America is grass-fed, 1% or a quarter of that, only 1% is raised in America. And so we're competing against dynamics where you've got these large incentives of lobbyist money, whatever, to obfuscate from the consumer the demand for the wholesome, nutrient-dense, local economic impact food they want to be supporting, right? So it's like how did we get here? And this is where I get into talking about, say, like Triffin's dilemma. Does anybody in the room know enough economics to know what Triffin's dilemma is? No, or yeah, some. Okay, so you got like the history, right? Dust Bowl, Great Depression in the 30s. Fast forward a generation, we leave the gold standard. Basically what that was admitting that we've robbed the whole world. We as a nation are in so much debt that we can't actually back with real money things anymore. That's rooted on the base, like agriculture and manufacturing economy wasn't actually making money. And so we leave the gold standard, go to paper money. I don't know why nobody bombed us for that when we robbed the whole world. Fast forward another 50 years, another generation. Now we've got like the housing crisis, 40 years, and that whole pop, right? Like what ends up happening is that we got out of the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, and all that because we went to war, went to like go defend freedom in Europe. And we ended up, because of military power, everybody got back to producing again, making bombs, working in the factories, everything of like energy of a civilization kind of sparked back up again. And then we became the world reserve currency post-World War. Okay, and this is a known phenomenon in economics that when you're a world reserve currency, they call it an exorbitant privilege with an exorbitant cost. You have to provide money to the world, but what ends up happening is you have to run a trade deficit. This guts your agriculture base, it guts your manufacturing base because you have a disadvantage. Like I was talking to some South American farmers when Trump started doing the tariff stuff, and they were all upset because like, well, we want to sell our beef into America. And I was like, okay, like let's talk about this. And they were telling me, well, American farmers just need to get more efficient to be able to compete with us. And I was like, well, what you're missing here is that the currency mismatch, because the U.S. being the reserve currency, your beef just by currency games is 30% cheaper than ours. What small business or ranch can stomach a 30% like just cost right off your bottom line to be competitive? And so this slowly erodes a nation's agriculture base, their manufacturing base, to where they become basically a financial services economy. And that's where we are in America today. The only things making money, I mean, Uber's not making money, Twitter's not making money. They're all multi-million, billion-dollar companies, and on the bottom line, like they're all in the red, right? The only things that really look like they're making money are these large asset accumulations and these equity stakes of basically either cannibalizing an industry, like Twitter cannibalizing mass media, Uber cannibalizing the taxi industry, like on and on you go, or some sort of vaporware type situation where you can take a digital idea and try to scale it. Like real things in America, due to monetary policy of inflation driven by the Federal Reserve with the reserve currency dynamic, is part of what's happened here. And it's also put us in the situation where, like we all talk about, young farmers need to be inheriting land. They can't afford to buy in at current asset prices or animal prices, right? Well, average ranch, they're losing 1.5% if you don't factor land appreciation. So it's like you've got an old boomer who wants to retire. They want their kid to start farming. They get to the end of their life and they realize, I've not made any money. I don't actually have any cash. I'm rich, but all it is in land appreciation. And so it's like, okay, do I accept a massive hit to my like standard of living? Do I just actually now work for my son, or like go become a greeter at Walmart and live like a pauper in order to like give my child the land, which I would argue none of us own land. We steward it for the next generation, right? It's not a liquid asset that we should think of as something we can extract from as ours, right? But if they didn't make any money, also due to this macroeconomic policy, monetary policy, how did they retire? They have to sell their land to their kids. Otherwise, they have nothing to live on, right? And so this culture, this economic, this political thing has forced even us who want to think of ourselves as the key stewards of soil, the key stewards of the foundation of society as farmers, into a posture of extraction that we don't realize why we're trapped being extractive, why we have to like erode the capital base of the soil to stay profitable, why we have to like erode the infrastructure, our own health, or why we have to steal it from our children by not passing the land on for them to pass the next generation, but try to sell it to them. It's rooted in the fact that we have a policy as a nation that is causing us to play a game that we can't overcome on the ground.
Everybody's trying to run out the clock and not have it stop on them, basically.
Anything to add to that, Matt?
Well, we're 38 trillion in debt, and I bet it went up today.
We were like 700 billion more in the last 100 days or something. So, go ahead.
Hey all, here is a quick note from one of our sponsors, American Farmland Trust, who leads the conservation agriculture movement, focusing on the land, the practices used on that land, and the farmers and ranchers who steward the land. Working from kitchen tables to the halls of Congress, AFT's mission is to keep farms and ranches thriving. Since its founding in 1980 as a membership-based organization, AFT has helped permanently protect over 8 million acres of agricultural land, advance regenerative farming practices on millions of acres, and supported thousands of farm families. Find technical resources, network opportunities, and more at farmland.org.
We're just laying the groundwork here. So. All right.
Well, let's get a little more real. This is going to be kind of blackpilling, but we want to have real conversations how to fix it. And most of the conversations I have aren't useful because we have to understand this stuff to know what it takes to fix this. Like my old sage or mentor, he used to always say, in order to have real hope to fix things in the world, you have to be courageous enough to admit how deep the darkness goes. We've got to look right at it. And that's one of the challenges is most people aren't. We're not looking right at the problems. So like stacked on top of this, like we've been talking about this, where not only is agriculture collapsing, we live in a nation that's collapsing. Mm-hmm. And if we don't take that into account, all of our conversations are just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic or looking through a soil microscope.
Hold a second.
While the ship sinks.
Let's hit that question though, because you're right on it. I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. I'm getting into whatever the boomers are getting out of, okay? Which in my case is livestock. I'm looking at crop insurance. I'm looking at the way the farm programs are going, and to me it looks like everybody is going to continue to be shoved into row crop production, okay? Why would I go into cattle? Matt's got cattle too, when row crops look easier. Because if the lowest common denominator is row crops, guys will take a lower return for the surety that they will still be there. Meaning cattle are work, and as you get older, you don't want to work as hard. I can see livestock getting pretty good going forward. You know, that's what I'm doing. Matt, what are you doing?
Well, one thing I've noticed is that if you try to get into something that's easy for somebody else to get into and it makes good money, pretty soon you're going to have a lot of friends doing it, and then there's not going to be any money. So I appreciated your pumpkin soup, squash soup in the last session. I thought that was a great way to add value to a waste product, basically. We're doing a beef thing too. We're trying to graze cheaper by putting them after crop residues with cover crops and stuff in it. I think it's important to get the cows back on the land. I can definitely see it in our yields. Our soil's better, has better tilth. Basically, I've noticed I typically don't go and try to rent more land. It usually comes to me because we're different. We're doing a cover crop thing. In my area, wind erosion's a big deal because we got a lot of vegetables. So there isn't much residue unless they do put a cover crop in there. And when the neighbor's field is blowing so bad the interstate gets shut down and mine's staying there, people go, I think I'm going to rent to that guy, and money doesn't matter as much anymore. So that's helped us have a financial edge, I guess, with doing all this as well.
So a little more context, then I'll get mine on that, right? Where we are in history, late stage democracy, what always happens is that the voter base, and in our case, an older voter base, votes to keep asset prices high, which is still accelerating the demographic and the pass-on collapse of the assets of farming, manufacturing, whatever, because it raises the price to get in, but they're forestalling their own collapse. So asset prices run just through purely monetary and government policy, and the government tends to throw out more and more bread and circuses to try to keep people calm and pass the buck to the future of robbing from the children of the nation somewhere. Whether this is robbing from the health because of using farming practices that don't actually make a healthy nation, or handing out money trying to keep things stable. But the whole thing is built on like this, like I've had a lot of conversations with the Maha crew where all the things that are needed to truly fix agriculture in America are stopping behaviors to allow creative destruction to take place, to have a reset where things shift. But the only political will out there is to add a subsidy on top of things. So it's like you got this like freight liner across the ocean of this ship with shipping containers stacked on it, right? And the ship's sinking. The inflation that is the main input into farming is land is the root problem. Land prices are running. The young generation can't afford it. Land is basically monetized, right? Like that concept. Gold's money, right? It's a store of value. You don't see gold used much for electronics or industrial purposes because it's worth more as a money held in a vault as a store of value asset than it is for like a productive purpose. We're seeing land be used the same way as a hedge, as a hard asset where it's treated as money, which is outcompeting its productive use. And so inflation is driven by government debt. The more subsidies, the more handouts we have, the more money we print, the more government debt goes up. And so a lot of this try to fix farming in America, return to regenerative, fix the soil, it's like stacking another crate on top of the shipping container. Yeah, you may be 8 feet higher from the water level on a sinking ship, but you've made it way more and now it's sinking faster, right? And so this whole phenomena is rooted in the fact that nobody can stop the freight train of the demographic situation in the U.S., the sovereign debt crisis in the U.S., so it's like, what do we do as young people in local communities? And this is where I return to, like, I love Charles Walter's initial, like, statement about agriculture, right? He says, in order for agriculture to be economical, it must be ecological. Hard agree. I would add to it, it must be measuring value over long enough time horizons and value of all capital assets, not just cash flows. And in order to do that at a scale that works, we must do it as local communities together. None of us can fix this on our own, right? And like, so like for me, I'll be totally honest, right? Like my story of scaling from zero. I got a Greg Judy style low-cost lease opportunity in Virginia. It was 28 acres, $1 a year, recreational horse farm. She wanted tax deductions back. So I signed that lease, had no money for cows. I was hanging out on Twitter because I'd found Bitcoin, and I was convinced that Bitcoin was going to be the future because I understood some of this history and economic stuff. And I was on Twitter because where all the Bitcoiners were, I wanted to learn about it. And when Bitcoin ran from like $5,000 to what was like $69,000 in 2022, my Twitter account grew with it with all the mania. And I ended up getting a DM from a wealthy Wall Street guy. He's like, hey, like this little farming thing you're doing, I see you out there posting videos, putting in fencing. I want in to be a part of it. I was like, no, you don't. Like, I'm using heritage breed piney woods, building zombie apocalypse proof cattle. Like, I'm going to push the edge of grazing science, learn everything in the real world. Like, there's no reason for you to do this with me. And he wrote me back. He's like, look, my world is kind of hedge fund investment banking. We're starting to realize we're getting on a war footing with China. We are learning that most of our food security of things we depend on here are tied to China, whether it's the amino acids being used in animal supplements, the medical stuff. And he's like, look, I want a few things. I want food security for my family measured in quality, not just calories. And he said, I'm also worried about a few other pieces. Like one is that I'm tired of owning investments on the mainstream marketplace where I'm buying ETFs stewarded by BlackRock that buy up houses to lease them back to my children. Like I want to be investing in things that move forward the world I want my kids to have. He said, I'm also concerned about being debanked for political beliefs or anything. And this was back in 2019. He saw a lot coming that ended up happening during COVID, right? And so we ended up coming with a program called Herd Shares where he bought in to own the breeding stock. Every year when the calves are weaned, we split the calves. It's all underneath of my management and control. And then the lion's share of the calves go to me. It's how I fund the operation. It gave me the capital base to get launched and get started, right? It was a beautiful inheritance, basically, of somebody with alignment helping me have the scale to get going in a way I never could have as a young farmer. COVID happens. My phone blows up with all his friends calling me like, hey, these herd share things, we went in on these too. And I'm like, well, I don't have any land, but sure, we'll try. And so I got some buddies together. I've moved from Virginia, bought 700 acres in Oklahoma. And I had a friend in Oklahoma, young lawyer, runs a family office for investment stuff, high net worth Native American guy. He co-signed a loan for me for the property. Never could have gotten started without him. Like, the blessing of his patronage was a huge boost for me. It subsidized me to get me going. And then when we launched, I raised money for buying the land in addition to him helping co-sign it. And we raised about 800 grand for a land holding company. The terms of the company were, we're going to buy this land. I'm never going to pay rent to the land holding company because I want to plow all the energy into trying to figure out these problems to fix this stuff in the world. And we're never going to sell the land. So you're going to own an asset. The asset will never be realized or capitalized on. Who wants to participate? You want to donate money to this farming mission we have? I had hundreds of thousands of dollars where, and my Twitter following is not that huge, it's low 20,000s. But I'd been telling my story and being authentic in the world and being honest, of just sharing the heart that like God's put in me to want to do this. And a number of people just DM'd me. They're like, hey, I was in my morning prayer time with God today, and he told me that I'm supposed to help back and launch you. I got 50 grand I'm buying into your land with. So I don't even understand all the details, but I need to explain it to my wife. So like we need to have a phone call so I can give you some capital to get you going. Like, that's how I got the land. Miracles. Like, I'm not being facetious when I say it. Like that, and then the herd shares. We bought the property. We had about 18 months of capital runway when we launched. That was just carry costs. That's not infrastructure. That's not getting more than my original 18 cows. But I knew I had appetite for herd shares. I have a die-hard crew of guys with me, about 3.5 guys. We count the patron kind of being like not on site, but helping back us and give us a safety net. Us 3 guys are willing to die on the altar of figuring this out. That's another form of a subsidy. It's loyalty and just vehemence to want to fix something in the world, right? And so then I went out and was able to go through the phone network and kind of hit the podcast circuit. We raised, over the last 3.5 years, $1.9 million or so in herd shares to scale up to the 500 head we're at now. This whole thing has been rooted in the fact that God's helped launch me with favor. It's the keystone that's done everything to open the door for me, bringing the people. But it's been having the courage to say the truth, to raise the banner of caring about something in the world greater than financial returns, and that people exist who care about this too. Them joining together, us building systems of collaboration to unite these people into functional ideas of how do we work together in a way that actually has long-term traction or viability. And then with that alignment and shared vision and shared heart, we all are going after fixing a problem in the world that doesn't currently pay us. It's a problem we believe in fixing. It's a problem we all want to have fixed for our children. We all view it, like Molly was saying, of planting a tree under which we don't sit. That we're putting our energy in knowing that if we don't fix this, America is in trouble. The hope I have is that those kind of people exist and that we're willing to do this. And it's not just about like, how do we make this financially viable? Well, I was talking with Kenneth Hamilton and his team with some of the fermented forage stuff yesterday. I explained to them like my genetics program for breeding efficient cattle. I can carry more cows per acre. Grazing practices, ultra-high density, where I can carry more cows per acre. Or integrate in like a novel version of his fermented silage system for like more feed conversion efficiency during finishing to finish faster for more profitability. And he looked at me and was like, well, you have every key biologically and entrepreneur-wise. I don't know how you can't not be profitable. And I said, well, the problem is I've made one bet. My bet is that we can do this with scale of stacking these pieces together to make it work, but that requires me to have people. And one of the biggest challenges right now is that the whole young generation, like 70% of them have a chronic disease. They've been raised in an education system that largely teaches you to regurgitate information rather than critically think. Like, we also have to not just invest in spinning up operations, restoring the capital base of the soil, or all these other things that we're trying to figure out, the knowledge base that we talk about a lot at conferences like this. We also have to restore the viability of the young generation purely in a cultural and a skill and competency lens. And my hope is the fact that there's enough of us that believe in this that we're going to just through sheer force of will and hope plow that until it, well, plows, yeah, no-till here, right? But like work hard at doing this until we turn the flywheel back over again with the scale of doing it together to overcome these large-scale dynamics. But the thing I would encourage is like, don't try to do it alone. And don't try to think nationally. You have to think locally. Even thinking state size is too big. You need to think your immediate community of the type of people you can touch. Work within your Dunbar limits. What would you add to that, Adam?
I would say every operation, specific, how many farmers are in here? All right. None of you guys are utilizing enough of your own resources. There is always more on the table that you're leaving. You're forgetting. It's different things. You have to look at it, every operation that you're doing with a fresh set of eyes. Joel found a very unique way to scale a cattle ranch. I wouldn't have been able to do that. Matt, you started first gen. You basically, in my situation was similar. I had to be an amoeba. If there was 5 acres that nobody wanted, that was the ground I got. You have to be able to look for those opportunities. The world is crashing down around us. What do they say? It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. What kind of fight are you going to have? How bad do you want to be in ag?
The journey of trying to eat healthier foods it can be a very complicated one. Sometimes the complication is just as simple as, where do you find the right foods? And one of the things that is incredible about Azure is that they've taken that complexity and really simplified it. Everything you get from Azure is, clean food. Just the simplicity of it, to have that is amazing.
For more information, visit azurestandard.com.
And see, where I'd add to that, right? Part of the reason I want to have these kind of hard talks, I'm really, really tired of watching my friends and the youth of this generation where regenerative agriculture is largely a churn factory. Like Salatin talks about, it's a 6-year cycle. It's excited young people in the front and broken dreams out the back. And grit is not enough. We have to be willing to humble ourselves, find ways to do this together, and learn to play infinite sum games instead of 0-1s, but we have to do it as local teams. If you're not doing it with a community of people with you who share the heart to fix things in the world, you're not going to be able to turn it over to get there. Because it's not the 90s or the early 2000s anymore. Asset inflation, like the labor and culture dynamics, the ability to even hire a subcontractor to competently do something, like the base things that make a farming economy work, the labor force, it's all just missing. And the only way to overcome that is having enough energy of shared heart that, one, keeps you encouraged, but where there's also enough creativity inside your community circle to play an infinite sum game to pivot around the problem, right? Like one of my mentors, we've had a lot of conversation about entrepreneurship, and we come to define it as this. Entrepreneurship is having an accurate long-term vision of the world and the adaptability and stubbornness to survive until it comes true. And that ability is rooted in the human capital of the people you're building with. And that's everything. Like if I did anything right, and like I've had tons of blessings, part of like even the Bitcoin thing, right, with Bitcoin price today, like these are all things that have enabled me to be stubborn, to stay the course. But the creativity of knowing how to take energy from like, say, like having assets in Bitcoin and plow that back into fixing the soil is something that was rooted in having relationships that taught me to know how to do that. The question was over there.
What's your thoughts or opinions on like the co-op systems, like here in Wisconsin, Organic Valley Co-op?
Matt, you want to hit that?
I guess I can't speak specifically on Organic Valley. I only have the outside view because I'm not involved with it or whatever. But I would say, by and large, most of our co-op systems they don't work anymore. A lot of the stuff that for the conventional side of things, I can go direct to these places to sell stuff, or I can go direct to them to buy them. Where I think our, again, conventional co-ops has missed the boat is there's specialty things that they could help us market. I can farm like you wouldn't believe, but when it comes to marketing, that's where I lack, and that's where I need help. I need help with the distribution, and this is stuff that I think that co-ops would be awesome at, but they're too busy, being busy until the next buyout and whatever else.
So we ship to Prairie Farms, and Prairie Farms is a cooperative, and I think we got 600 some members. Very good, very well-run cooperative, but they're swimming in the same ecosystem as everything else. Everything's financialized. They're trying to gain scale. When they bid a a milk contract for a school district, you're talking about down to the 10th of a penny per carton. The margins are squeezed everywhere. It's that model, in my mind, has run its course. So now it's, okay, if everybody's in the same boat, like Joel said, and we just keep stacking containers on top, where do we go from here? Okay, so cooperatives, in my mind, are a narrow, how do I put this? The exact same dynamic is happening in the co-ops as everything else.
The thing I would add to that, though, and I'm sitting up here, and now that I'm up here, I don't remember anything, but there was a documentary that the farm was like in central Illinois, and they were part of a co-op system, and like they supplied restaurants in Chicago with stuff. Some of you probably seen it, and I can't remember the name of it, but I thought that would work awesome. Like, you know, I'll grow the kale, you can grow the carrots, you can grow the beef. You know, instead of sitting here just pounding on each other and piling on and making nothing, you know, that's how a co-op ought to be run, if you ask me.
So I would go back to one of the root problems is the middle's gone. The things are either subsidized hobby farms by somebody having a tech job to bit of work on an acre or two, or it's mega corporate farming, which is subsidized by access to cheap debt to play finance games. Like, the only people really making money in the cattle industry right now are cattle traders. They're basically using the lossy small family farms that are small to capitalize on understanding cattle market values to do high frequency trading of a hard asset, right? The root of this issue is where we have to understand we're playing financial games, because a lot of the root of what's happening is the financialization of the market in our nation, right? You have to have that context and have the skill and wisdom to know that, like, we have to win that somehow and play that somehow. For me, that's been Bitcoin, of keeping that on my balance sheet. But you look at like the approach to trying to do this in a community-oriented way. You've got like people trying to build farming communes, and I probably don't need to explain, those are usually just freaking disasters. Or you've got co-ops, and the problem with a co-op is that they're usually impotent to solve the real problem, because once again, the scale of relationship is too large. You're trying to swim in the large ecosystem of the nation versus kind of a small shared vision and heart. And what I've seen as being successful for me is just to bluntly raise the banner of we're exiting the world of financial incentives. We have a community of people that's small enough but has enough energy in it that we can say, we don't care about profitability right now. We care about having something that is sustainably going to survive this challenging season in our nation, to be there for my children. And we have a depth of relationship of people who share the vision of understanding this, that we're willing to kind of exit the terms of the game together. And I call it like collaborative relationships instead of cooperative relationships. It's not as trying to be as much in each other's space as like a commune where you're all doing the same thing, like, and living on the same piece of ground. But it's like we share a vision, like with the herd shares. Like, they're not stuck there. They can take their cows and sell them and exit. But while the cows are there, they're under my management, and they have to accept the leadership. And that leadership enables me with strong captaincy to go tackle real problems in the world, right? Without alignment of vision of exiting the terms of the game, you're destined to lose because the deck is stacked against you.
There was a question, a couple of them out there.
Molly?
So I think, and maybe agree, and what I try to preach is that we, the people, have to be that group that doesn't care, and I'm not saying doesn't care about money, but like, food has to cost what it costs, and there has to be a group, and it's privilege and blah, 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 I'm sure, but there has to be a group of people that care enough to start paying the food costs what it costs and pay what it costs, because right now, you can't compare the apples to the oranges or to the, I mean, and it's not, I mean, these guys gave these examples, but like, it's across every industry. Oranges are 38% less today to the packing house than they were in 1978. And what was the, like, with inflation, I'm not adjusting for inflation, I'm saying.
Or adjusted for nutrient density, like takes 10 oranges to equal 1.
So a conventional orange farmer today is getting $60 per 1,000 pounds of oranges right now. Organic is like $85 per 1,000 pounds of oranges. It was more than that inspire the public, the consumer base, to be that energy and say, I'm gonna pay what food costs. It doesn't matter if you can get milk at Dollar General for $2.99 a gallon. My milk costs $18 a gallon. I'm sorry, that's what it costs for you to produce it, and that's what it is. And we have to inspire some percentage, and then yes, that's privileged food, blah, 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 for privileged people. But until we can shift perception, because like you said, in the 30s, 30% of everybody's food was spent on, 30% of everybody's income was spent on food. Now we're spending 5 to 7%, and we're going out to eat for most of our meals. So the actual spend is even less.
Totally agree. I would add to that like, say people are either going to pay for healthcare or pay for food, right? But this all requires having long enough time horizons for people to think this way. And with a whole middle class economy that's in debt, like the pay later apps are now 25% used to pay for groceries. This is really challenging. We're like, yeah, we definitely need wealthy people willing to help support restoring the capital base of our soil and restoring the generation of farmers to the land, being willing to pay what food's actually worth. But I'd add to this that our farming systems now are incredibly lossy because of the way national logistics of food supply chains work, that if we get people together sharing long time horizons and caring about these things, there's enough efficiencies there that like you don't have to have a young person paying a mega premium to make this work, right? Like I've had young people come work at my farm. I pay them in herd shares. It's the aligning of vision and time horizons, because farm, right? Like most people, they want a steak. They want them like, oh, in a couple hours, I'm going to go, like after going to Costco, going to go and put it on the grill at home and eat it, right? Versus us, I've got a female cow. I got to inseminate it, then a year to gestate, a year to wean. If you really want to finish grass-fed beef, probably 2 years of finishing it on grass. And so it's like I've got 4 years time horizon to get that steak produced, where I'm carrying the time horizons of the capital base, okay? But like with these young people who've worked for herd shares, they're with this long-term vision, they're able to kind of hold that for a while and actually share time horizons with me and caring about creating food value for themselves over longer periods of time. By us sharing alignment and willingness to have long-term vision, it actually enables me to pay them at a premium rate because I'm not paying them out of my cash reserves. I'm sharing my asset base growth with them, where they're actually able to get access to super high quality beef at a price point of labor that's totally achievable for them because of how good I can pay them if they're thinking long term. And so as you think as communities, there's like, just like you were doing with like the like value added products, right? There's so many edges of value that when we work together as tighter knit relationship networks of communities, like I'm thinking Dunbar limits of like 35 to 50 people, 150 tops, big enough that like you can have some scale of having big projects, but small enough you know everybody's first name and have real relationship. That there is so much edges to capitalize on and capture that you don't just need to go into like a super wealthy part of town selling rich product. Like the local community and people with you can flourish too, even if they're lower or middle class.
You have to line the incentives with the outcomes. That's what it takes. There was a question back there.
Hey, eco farmers, this is Taylor Henry with Acres USA. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource for you. You need to check out the Acres USA membership and magazine. You farm in the physical world and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres USA magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres USA, but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were all hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. And finally, if you're like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. And to make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes.
Well, look at the rise of the carnivore diet.
So this is where I'd make a pretty extremist statement. I don't think as farmers we should be raising commodities. I think what we should be doing is focus on the fact that we're the stewards of civilization in every sense of the word. The health of our nation, the function and productivity of our soil, the flourishing of the ecology that's rooted in the health of the people itself, the base economic productivity, and that we need to be uniting people together who are no longer thinking about food as commodities, but thinking about farms as the cornerstone of the nation and returning to looking at that as the vision, just like in like the era of the war times of like victory gardens or like rallying together to do whatever it takes to restore the base of our society. And I believe if we do so, that there's ways to creatively play infinite sum games, like the herd share system, like playing finance games, like I carry assets in Bitcoin, which out appreciate the inflation of my input costs, right? Or like the like stuff Kenneth's working on feed conversion efficiency with fermented forages, right? When we play long time horizon games, tackling the mission statement as how do we restore our nation through restoring the foundation stewardship of farms, it allows you to attack the war with a different vision that gets the right people thinking the right way to solve the right problems.
What do you think of the 1980s farming crisis? Is that the same as today?
Totally different. The 80s farm crisis was largely a demographic problem. The boomers, there was a lot of them. There were 75 million boomers. They all came of age in the 70s. That caused the inflation. And the natural crash out was the 1980s. So they were all trying to get through the door at the same time. This one is a totally different problem. This is asset inflation, not debt. It's the other way.
There's one in the back.
That's awesome. That's super cool. So that makes me think of my fiance, Erin Martin. She's working in the food as medicine movement. She founded Fresh RX Oklahoma. So like the basis of what she's up to, she got the food as medicine bill passed in Oklahoma, which she's working towards where she's got a program that's sourcing nutrient-dense food from local regenerative farms. And then doctors are prescribing chronic disease patients, primarily type 2 diabetics, to be a part of her program. She provides sourcing the food. She provides cooking education and training, community support, and accountability. And the bill that they passed in Oklahoma is working towards having insurance companies actually pay for outcomes rather than simply treating symptoms of chronic disease, right? So she's channeling healthcare dollars to change that inversion of food to healthcare money back from healthcare money back into food system money, right? And there's layers of challenges there, which I'm sure you like. What you did is you've probably just fixed some of these, where a lot of local food systems, they only use pre-prepared food. They don't have people who know how to use knives anymore, like liability-wise. They only have microwaves in a lot of school kitchens. So like there's all these kind of root issues we have to address, kind of restoring foodways, restoring education, like getting people to actually value that local food back to kids again, or local food fixing health issues again. And like, I don't know how much liability some of these things have for the long haul, even with the food as medicine movement, because in my mind, I see the insurance industry is going to go bankrupt in 10 years, and I'll look at their balance sheets, right? But like, what we're working on is how do we channel as much energy as possible into our local rural farming communities while we're in this situation in our nation. And I think the key, like kind of more hopeful side, I think our key edges here are like, one, how do we get more yield per acre while growing biological diversity and fertility in the soil? A lot of the science being worked on here is hugely driving that forward. Like, that's one of the places in the regenerative movement we're doing the best. You've got like stuff like Kenneth Hamilton with the fermented forage. How do you get more nutrient-dense beef per pound of feed going in the animal with the science he's working on there? There's all these little ways we're starting to play infinite sum games to restore biological diversity, soil fertility, while growing more value per acre, right? Then like, we've got how do we scale systems where, like, as a regenerative ranch, I'm not at 22 head, I'm at 500, like with the herd share and community back system. So there's like financial collaborative systems. That's another space we can be creative inside of. Are there any other key spaces we can brainstorm creatively in that you guys can think of to play infinite sum games to kind of overcome these challenges?
We've tried to plug the holes, whether it's fertility, whether it's nutrients, plugging the holes on the farm, because there's a lot of waste. When you have a subsidized system, you end up with a lot of waste inherent into that system. There was a question here.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so many key ideas here. One was just getting collaboration going with your small community. I wonder what you're doing as farmers to identify people to collaborate with, and how you're putting yourself in that leadership position.
Telling the story honestly is a huge one, because everybody's just tired of hollow answers. It sounds kind of dark to be having a conversation like we are here now, but these kind of conversations are how the right people who are willing to be change agents meet each other, because they're the people who are willing to be honest, to take it on the chops to figure it out. So one of the things I've learned, and I've said this in my operation, I've been shocked how much I've been able to get a seat at the table at local conversations around like ranching or whatever. And what I've realized is it's basically a three-legged stool. It's the heart and passion and love of what you're doing is just electric. That's a huge part of it. Rylan, you're one of the best examples of that I've ever seen. There's true expertise and knowledge where people know that you've got creativity and ability to go solve problems, so they're willing to like trust to hold space for you to go out in the world and challenge things. And then there's scale, because people know you're actually playing a game that can be impactful. When you put those three pieces together, you end up building networks and community where people jump on the ship with you to go solve problems in a way you wouldn't if you didn't have all three.
Yeah, what we've noticed is the problems are inherent everywhere, and it's every little area. Matt and I, different areas, completely different, parts of the state. The same set of problems comes up, and it's like, okay, how are you tackling that? How am I tackling it? The network, huge.
So kind of to tie a lot of these pieces together, young farmers, ranchers are functioning in a non-profitable industry, largely rooted in political and macroeconomic trends. We're trying to, while dealing with that in an extracted system that's already non-profitable because it's extracted everything down to zero, fixing the base capital assets of restoring them over long time horizons, doing so with an erosion of culture, erosion of like the labor contractor work base, and with no assets ourselves to invest into spinning up, fixing those long-term problems. And the energy has to come from somewhere. And it comes from ultimately just creativity and fortitude and doing it together. So like some of those ideas I just listed are like my creative spaces, I think, were the most like area is for us to like tackle this, to find more energy to plow into solving these problems. Do you guys have any others? Like the other pain point for me is the labor problem of we need solutions for mentoring the hearts and minds of the young generation to make them super effective citizens in the world again who are adding and creating value as pillars. Like that's a huge problem. It's a health problem. It's an education problem. It's a spiritual and heart problem too. That's a huge one I'm wrestling at right now that I think I've got all the pieces I need once I fix that to turn the whole thing and get it going. And then I'll be able to spin up an example farm that I'll be able to take all these pieces I'm putting together to help others do them. Does anybody else have any other ideas of places we can play creative games to get more energy into fixing things? So the challenge there is the misinformation in the marketplace. Of there's many places selling that but providing a false thing. How do we fix that? Any ideas?
By not greenwashing, by giving them the truth and inviting them out to the farm. You know?
I think you're onto something. I think we have a glacial movement here. We all want it quick. We want it fast. We want it, at the speed of a tweet. But I think this is a cultural problem that we're seeing that is going to take some time. And I'm seeing this happening slowly. Look at the rise of the carnivore diet. There's more information out there. There's the Yucca app. There's more information on our cell phones now than at any time in history. So I think we're moving in the right direction. It's probably slower than all of us would like, but I do believe it is happening.
Hey farmers and ranchers, we've got some incredible events coming up here at Acres USA in 2026. First, from March 25th through March 27th, Steve Campbell is joining us for a hands-on livestock workshop. Steve is a lifelong cattleman who focuses on fertility, efficiency, and building better herds using low-cost, nature-based principles. Then, from April 30th to May 2nd, we're hosting the American Regeneration event at Molly Englehart's farm. Speakers include Rick Clark, Will Harris, and Molly herself, and many more over 2 full days. The third day includes an optional tour of Sovereignty Ranch, and we'll also be celebrating Molly's new book and the vision behind this movement. More events are coming soon. Find details and register at acresusa.com/events.
You could cover the distribution costs by eliminating the packaging.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a lot of things we can do.
Good.
Well, I got an idea or a solution.
Hit me.
Start where you are, so that's for me. Travel 1,600 miles to come to this conference, but when I'm home, what am I doing here? Put more energy to travel 1,600 miles. Not going to happen at a conference. Not going to travel. Not going to happen. Happen in that community. I'd say start where you are.
Well said.
Agreed. I mean, you can't steer a ship that has no heading, right? Like a sailboat without any momentum, the udder does no good to steer it. The rudder does no good.
I just want to pick up on your mentor idea. I feel like if we're gonna capture the hearts and minds of young people, we have to be the older generation has to be worthy of having mentees, and we have to tell a compelling story, and we have to lead a compelling life.
Hard agree. Yeah, one of the problems I'm seeing is that the older generation is not really realizing the way the asset inflation is what enabled them to get to where they are. And they tend to talk down to the young generation. And the young generation is getting so disgruntled and frustrated about it that they're starting to disconnect. And where that ultimately leads is just revolution. This is where societies just totally flip. Our greatest hope is to have those of us of the older generation who are willing to be ambassadors and be honest of like, yes, the deck is stacked, but I'm here to help you. And to engage with a level of compassion, honesty, and generosity and grace to help restore what's been broken, but also restore them, their hearts, their minds, their competence, but also be willing to be gracious as they work out their disgruntledness, because a lot of that's reasonable with what this young generation is living through in America today. And that's a huge one that's been making my team successful, is the willingness to be honest about that and be gracious with them while we work with them.
Solution. Couldn't you do like a land trade where you like take people hunting or fishing to up your cost to help with your cost of your farm?
Function stacking is a huge, huge thing that's also super beneficial. It's hard with the labor pinch. And so it goes back to, once again, training young people to have diversification of people on a farm to capture all the wasted value that's everywhere. I really think mentoring the young generation is the thing. If we can fix that, we can get the problems going, because everything else is solvable. The hearts and minds are the biggest battle. Hit me.
Thank you for putting this panel together. I want to double click on something you were talking about earlier about sort of opting out of the financial system, or at least the kind of short-termism that's part of it. So does that mean you're not looking for investors, you're not even in like impact investors or like mission-oriented people, or or does it just matter per person what that alignment looks like? And then so maybe talk a little bit about that. And the second part of the question is, you mentioned your own assets, meeting someone on Twitter who had something that they could offer you. I think about other sort of institutional players that might be able to help catalyze or start to tip the balance. Nonprofit, like the Nature Conservancy is investing a lot in regen ag. Faith institutions similarly can have a longer term time horizon than a financial institution. Where should we be looking for those kinds of jump starts?
Great question. So I focus on getting people to understand the problems, because a lot of the issues here, a lot of these collaborative endeavors, is we're not all trying to solve the same thing. So the root of where things really are the pain points. And I look for alignment of vision and ideology, where there are, like, the herd shares do have growth. Like, there are things, like, it's not totally like a donation. But I tell people from the very beginning, if you want to maximize purely financial returns, like, go buy tech stocks or Bitcoin, right? Like, I sell the product that what we're building, the product is the restoration of the farming base of America. Like, are you willing to take lower financial returns than what you could get in the market in other places for the return of planting a tree that our young generation can actually flourish on when we're gone? And just trying to get people together who share that with enough understanding of the problem to be in alignment on these are the steps of what we have to tackle first. There's a bunch of other questions. We probably only got time for one more.
I was going to
Just
say, thank you guys all for coming. We will be around here the rest of the afternoon. So if you guys individually want to come up, more than welcome to.
would love to chat more and talk about wherever we can brainstorm how to plow more energy into fixing these problems. Appreciate you guys.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in and being part of a growing community committed to soil health, land stewardship, and ecological agriculture. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and all other trusted podcast platforms. Give us a follow, give us a like. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. A big thank you to our podcast sponsors, Azure Standard and American Farmland Trust, for supporting these conversations and helping us to spread the information and message of ecological farming. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who cares about the future of farming. We'll see you next time on the Acres USA podcast.